As the longest liberation movement in Africa, has the party really freed its people from the apartheid bondage?
Well, let me also first congratulate them. Indeed, in the Lendlela. And there are still more kilos to cover as we move on. Yes, the response to the question would be, yes, a lot has been covered. And yet, indeed, yes, indeed, a lot still needs to be done.
Now, 20 years in democracy, Professor, what has the ANC really achieved, in your view?
You know, all the material things notwithstanding, for uppermost for me is that intangible aspect that seldom is spoken about. The human dignity restored by that faithful cross on the 27th of April, 1994.
Absolutely.
The human dignity restored by that. The dignity, the self-worth, self-esteem, the sense of pride with which people now walk on the streets and on the pavements. Some take it for granted. But if you look back, indeed you would say, more than anything else, that self-esteem, that human dignity is uppermost. Water, sanitation, infrastructure, housing, and so forth. Those are material things that are tangible, that are evident, and I concede they have done pretty well. But it is this bit that I'm very proud of.
All right. Now, Professor, what have been some of the most apparent failures of the ruling party?
Oh, yes. Yeah. And you know, they have failed dismally in certain areas. And unfortunately, they could have avoided that. Some of us thought we would do better than the rest of the continent precisely because we were the last to be independent. By that, I suggest that we would have learned, or we were expected to have learned before taking over from the mistakes of those who went before us. But we don't seem to have learned, especially in relation to sins of incumbency. One, you know, nepotism and corruption brought down many liberation movements, and one would not have thought the ANC would fall into that. But somebody might say to me, because you are living in a fool's paradise, the God of man is so powerful that very few, the likes of Mandela, Nyerere, and so forth, cannot at least lie prostrate in front thereof. So indeed, we fell flat when it came to that bit, and that is what has eaten into the moral fiber of the leadership, of the organization, and by extension, even of society. Is it not interesting that today there is hardly anybody who is not talking about corruption rampant in the country and even in the movement? Yet 15 years ago, when people began to raise these issues, and indeed, if they were taken serious instead of being vilified and demonized, perhaps we would have avoided some of the critical challenges we are facing now and the moral decay that the society is experiencing now. So I'm saying we could have done better, and we could have benefited from those that went before us, but being fallible, indeed we collapse at the altar of political expediency and at the god of money.
With that being said, Professor, the ANC launches its 2014 election manifesto. What do you hope to see in the new policy?
Look, you know, the ANC government has done so much for me in terms of spending money to develop, to uplift and improve the education system. Yet we are not winning. Yet we are getting worse by the day. Can we perhaps pause, reflect, and accept that something is fundamentally wrong with the system, despite the resources being invested in it? Can we listen to other voices, especially those outside the broad movement? Maybe there's something they can contribute. That they criticize doesn't suggest to me that they are less patriotic and less loving of this country that can't carry members of any other political party. And I'm saying we need to address the education, challenges, because in education lies the future of any country. And knowledge is power. And if you want to compete competitively in the global village, we need to empower ourselves. And as of now, we aren't in the list preparing our children to be competitive.
Absolutely, Professor. Now, the alliance is threatened with the COSATU's biggest affiliation, NUMSA. They threat to withdraw its financial support to the ANC. Can the difference in the tripartite alliance be mended before the elections, you think?
No, it is too late in the hour. And as you raise this point, I'm reminded of what I said on the eve of the Polokwane conference. And I said, you hate each other so much that you are likely to find it difficult to reconcile when the storm has calmed. And if you look at it, the way they are at each other's throat, I don't see any prospect of them really mending ways and speaking in one voice and acting in unison. That's the first bit. The second bit is that some may say we accept that the broad church will not rule forever, will not be popular with the people forever. To the extent that some within NUMSA are still willing to work with us, let's embrace them. But those who want to work away, let them also wish them well. And I think that would be a mature adult view, because the broad church will not remain in power forever, and the broad church will not remain the broad church forever. And the broad church indeed will attract men and women of good character, but equally of vice characters.
Very interesting, Professor. Now, there are service delivery protests almost weekly around the country. Does this mean the ANC, as the ruling party, is slowly losing its popularity?
Oh, no, there's no question about that. And I don't think they should be worried about that. After 10 years in office, right, people begin to lose interest in you. And after 20 years in office, when you are too dominant, as the ANC is, you also become arrogant. And you also have men and women who become careerists and who begin to impact negatively on the organization itself. So the people, there are good men and women in there, but equally there are also careerists, opportunists who are also really besmirching the good name of the ANC. And on that basis, I would want to accept that 20 years in governance, especially as a liberation movement, and if you take into account history, surely they have done well, but they must begin to accept that their day is waning, and is waning pretty fast, and it's natural. It's a process of historical evidence suggests that liberation movements after 20 years, they remain in office either by hook or by crook.
Thank you so much, Professor, for talking to us today and raising very important issues, in fact, from our Pretoria studios. That was Professor Lesiba Teffo. In other news now, maths and science remains a key concern amid the much celebrated matric pass rate, with more pupils taking